the challenges and opportunities in caring for our common home. So right away, I'll invite Prem Kauko to step forward. He is a professor of moral theology and coordinator of the Diploma of Integral Ecology at Pontifical Universities and Ateneo and in Rome. So welcome, and he is going to introduce the panel for this session. Welcome.
Good morning. Today, we'll dedicate our discussion and reflection on caring for our common home, challenges and opportunities for Jesuits and their partners. I'd like to invite Dr. Sunita Narayan and His Eminence Cardinal Pedro Barreto on the dais. Please. Dr. Sunita Narayan is a Delhi-based environmentalist and author. She is currently the Director General of Center for Science and Environment and the editor of the fortnightly magazine Down to Earth. Dr. Narayan plays an active role in policy formation on issues on environment and development in India and globally. She was a member of the Indian Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change and has been awarded the Padma Shri, the fourth highest civilian honor. In 2005, the Center for Science and Environment, under her leadership, was also awarded the Stockholm Water Prize. In 2016, Time magazine listed her as one of the 100 most influential women in the world. People, sorry.
Women always get put aside, otherwise it's a small little cute group.
Anyway, thank you, Dr. Narayan. Her work is to research the interface between food and environment. Her interest is to ensure the countries in the southern hemisphere, they do not adopt highly chemical intensive agricultural systems, as they do not have the capacity to mitigate and manage the toxic fallout on the environment and human health. So to you, Dr. Narayan, our word.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here, honored to be here. And I look, and I will particularly thank Father Xavier. I think he's very much instrumental to bringing me here, so thank you very much. So let me share with you some of the ideas that we are working on and how we are looking at both. We all know the crisis. The question is the opportunity, and that's what I want to discuss with you today. The world, our world, feels as if it is at its lowest place today. It cannot get worse, you would think. Your conference some years ago called it a broken world. It is that and much more. It is younger, it is meaner, it is more unequal, and this is at a time when we are faced with truly a global crisis, the crisis of climate change. And this crisis needs us to understand that we are living in an interdependent world, that we cannot deal with the climate crisis unless we recognize the need for inclusion, the need for justice, and the need for cooperation. But when I say this, and I was one of those who was at the Rio conference in 1992, and I keep saying that was the age of the innocents. When we talked about justice at that time, it still seemed to be attainable. Today, when you talk about the very idea of justice, it seems so unreachable. It is almost as if the very discussion makes us naive or it makes us idealistic. But this is where I believe, and I know that I share this with all of you, that we need to stand differently. We need to believe in this seemingly impossible world that we need to have the dare to hope. Not only because we have to, but because it is possible to build a kinder, a more caring world. But to do this, we need to understand the reality, as I said, and then the opportunity. And this is what I will discuss. First, the reality. Think about our world and how it has changed drastically, how it changed in the 1990s. I'm old enough to keep that as one of those decades which was seminal in how it changed the world. On the one hand, we had these symbolic changes of our century, the fall of the Berlin Wall, which was the end of, fascism or whatever we would like to call it. And then the collapse of the apartheid regime, which was the end of racism. Huge changes which we witnessed in our own lifetime. And yet what we missed in the 1990s was really what was also happening. On one hand, the world moved several steps towards economic globalization. We framed rules that would allow free and unfettered commerce through WTO, through the creation of WTO. The world agreed also that as we would be interrelated in terms of trade, the adverse impacts of the growth would also go beyond nations, which is why at that period of the 90s, a number of global agreements were framed, from climate change to biodiversity. And these are global rules that we would agree, that were agreed upon how we would cooperate to live in this interdependent world. So on one hand, we had economic globalization. On the other hand, we had the beginnings of what we would call ecological globalization. But, and I think this is where we need to reflect, where did we go wrong? The rules of global trade, which were made by the then rich to get richer at the cost of the poor people and their environment, are today not even working for the rich. In the past 25 years, globalization has indeed linked markets, opened up trade, made some in the world much more affluent. Today, this same globalization is at the core of the anger and the insecurity of the rich world. From Brexit to the growth of the ultra-right movements in the world. I call it the revenge of the rich who did not get richer. It is the revenge of the educated, the well-off, who believe that they are entitled to more and that this is being taken away by others. Also, ecological globalization, the counter to economic globalization, failed because trade won over climate. Consumption won over emission control. The success of economic globalization has showed up in the balance sheet of emissions. Today, let us be very clear. The developed countries, the rich countries, buy goods which they import from countries like us. But at the end of the day, this means that CO2 emissions did not decrease. The rich world exported its pollution, continued its consumption. The goods discounted the cost of labor and the cost of environment. So let's not be surprised if our planet is indeed fried today. That is part of the systems that the framework that we have put into place. The fact is, globalization has increased inequity. This is at the core of the problem today. It is also at the core of climate change. Ultimately, if emissions are linked to economic growth, then the question is how this growth will be shared between people and between nations. Economic and ecological globalization are about making rules that benefit people and the planet. They are not about rules that to make ways in which some will get richer or that we will blow up the planet. So this is what we need to discuss in our world today. But this demands a change in the narrative. For too long, the two discussions on growth and climate change have been separated. For too long, we have been told that we cannot discuss the issues of equitable growth, equitable allocation of the carbon budget. We cannot discuss climate injustice when it comes to combating climate change. These are two things, they are separate. But we need to bring this discussion together. Because if we do, then this becomes the way that we make change in the world. And I will come to it. How? The globalization of markets is also combined with another big development, the huge growth of the internet. This has connected people, and more importantly, it has brought the marketplace into our space. It has connected cyberspace. It has connected consumers. And all of us have been very willing participants in this makeover. It seemed so benign when the internet was growing. We believed in all the social media and how it would build a different world. We thrived on it. We vented our anguish, we vented our hate on this new platform. We crossed the line between public civility and brutality and into bestiality so quickly that it should really shame us. So in the next years of development, it is important for us to rethink the question of states, market, and society. We have dismembered the state, we have grown the market, and we believe we have empowered the society through all the forums of social media. We believe that people would be the modulating voices over the market. They would be the check over the market. But we forgot to ask, which society is being empowered and for what? And so slowly, the circles have closed. State, market, and the aspiring consuming societies have merged. They have become one. But anyone outside this circle has stopped getting counted. They are being erased, literally. And this is where we must discuss the other reality, the reality of climate change. Across the world, there are signs of impending catastrophe. We do not need to be told in the developing world that climate change is a reality. We know it. Our monsoons today have become more erratic. Our farmers today are worst impacted. They are the victims of climate change, a problem that they did not create. Variable rain events is completely destroying the livelihoods of the poor. But what we also need to discuss is the fact that when it comes to climate change, the legacy is the problem. It is not just in terms of carbon dioxide, which is already in the atmosphere. The real legacy is that our world has agreed to an agreement on climate change that was not equitable. This meant that there was no real cooperation, and the poor did not reduce their emissions because the rich were uncooperative. They refused to do so. Today, we have no real answers to wean away from the fossil economy. If the world had accepted the need to share atmospheric space, it would have shared, it would have reinvented growth. But the fact is, today we are bringing this into our world. The two worlds are getting more and more interconnected, the economic and the ecological. The economic is interconnected because of the way we have grown business. Quite simply, it is labeled as growth. It brings wealth to some, and worse, it does this without jobs. Not just for the poorest, but also for the middle class, what I spoke about earlier. And unless we recognize that the source of employment is in the economies of the poor, the informal, the opportunity of building livelihoods from the land, the forests, we will not succeed. But two, climate change is adding to the economic stress of the poorest. I spoke about the fact that they are victims of climate change. But what does this crisis mean for the lives of people who are already living at the edge of survival? It is a matter of record that every extreme weather event, flood or drought or sheer poverty, forces people to migrate looking for jobs. It pushes them out of their homes. Sometimes it is temporary, but now increasingly, with these extreme rain events, it is really breaking the back of the very poor. It is like the last straw on the camel's back. In today's world, therefore, as I keep thinking about this, we really have two simultaneous jeopardies. One is that in our interconnected world, it transports climate-altering carbon dioxide emissions from one country to the global atmosphere, and two, it transports global news at the speed of mobile telephone. The push and the pull will increase the movement of people. The push is increasing. So what will be our response to this hastened and induced migration? Already immigration is defining politics of many countries. In India, we are beginning to count outsiders, and we really don't know what we will do after we have counted them. But the immigration narrative is real. And already we are doing a really bad job in handling our response, both in action and in words. It is egging on fear and insecurity, bitterly polarizing communities and feeding what I call the nationalist brigade. This is not to say that migration is bad. In fact, cities and countries of the world have been made because people have left homes and settled and built new prosperity. But today it is reaching tipping points, and it will increase. And we have no idea how many people are migrating because they are being pushed from out of their lands. We do a census once in 10 years. By the time the data comes, it's always out of date. But what is clear from the sheer numbers of what I call illegal, or the state calls illegal and unauthorized settlements that are springing up in our cities, that the number of new settlers is large. It will put strain on how we manage our cities. It will turn politics into a vile discourse. And this is how we have to start talking about the need to combat climate change. So in all this, can we really be thinking even of hope? Is there even a possibility for us to sit here and discuss, that there is a possibility to do something differently? I mean, I work in Delhi. Most of my colleagues here work in even more difficult situations in remote parts of the country. But I would argue with all of you, yes, there is a possibility to turn this around. And how? Let me list 3 things that I see are the growing imperatives that we should maximize, optimize on, actually, celebrate and find ways of pushing those things out further. First is what I call the imperative. I work on air pollution control in my city. It's been 20 years. We've been fighting and fighting and fighting. I was in court day before, and I will be in court on Friday as soon as I get back to Delhi, where we are pushing to clean up the air. But what is the most interesting thing about air, and I'm beginning to really use this to push for action, is that it is a great equalizer. Unlike the bottled water that we saw in the film, bottled water is something which allows the rich to opt out of pollution. We care about our rivers. Yeah, it makes our heart bleed that our rivers are dead, dying, just not being cremated. But the fact is, it doesn't affect us. We move to bottled water. But the rich and the poor, when it comes to air, are interconnected. We are enjoined. There is no way that the rich in my city can get clean air if they do not transform their mobility system so that it works for all. The rich in my city cannot get clean air if they do not think about the clean energy that is needed for the poorest woman who is today cooking on biomass fuel and hurting her own lungs. But her pollution is going into the same airshed in which the SUV, the diesel SUV of the rich middle class of my city pollute. So it is a common airshed. And all the air purifiers, because that's the one question I'm constantly confronted with in Delhi, which air purifier should I buy? And I'm always responding to say, buy whichever air purifier you want, but you will still have to breathe. So the fact is, this connection, the imperative that you will have to do something and you will have to make sure that it is inclusive growth, it is equitable growth, because without that, you will not have sustainable growth. This imperative is something that we need to discuss more and more in every circumstance. The second is dissent. We saw this in the film, but how I am placing it in front of you is the fact that this is a dissent with a difference. All over the world, the environmental movements are based on just one idea: not in my backyard. NIMBY. Ordinary people in Europe, in the US, everywhere have used NIMBY to say no nuclear power plant in my backyard, no waste incinerator in my backyard, no hazardous waste dump site in my backyard. But the fact is that when the middle class say not in my backyard, they move the backyard to the homes of the poor. That has always been how NIMBY has been used in our world. But if you look at the decades of struggle for the control of resources that have intensified in our world, in every nook and cranny, as we saw in the film, where land is being acquired or water is being sourced from industry, people are fighting. They're fighting against mining. There are million pollution mutinies happening. And this is because people depend on the land, the forest, the water that they have in their vicinity. They know once these resources go or degraded, there is no way ahead. This is their survival. This environment for them is not a luxury, it is a matter of survival. This is the environmentalism of the poor against the environmentalism of the rich. Because when the urban and the middle class Indians, and I say this more in India increasingly, when we face an environmental threat, we do not stop to ask, so in whose backyard will our waste go? We forget the more we consume, the higher the cost of collection and disposal. So we look for band-aid solution. And this is why the NIMBY of the poor is so much more powerful. I'll give you an example from one village in Kerala. One village in Kerala which stood up to say the waste of the capital city of the state will not come to their village. It will not be dumped there. They lost the case up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of India said, no, the municipality has the right to that waste disposal site which was in the vicinity of the village. But two women, one woman in the village, one woman in the city, leading the head of the municipality, the woman in the village has made sure that for the last 5 years, not a single ton of waste has come to this village from the capital city. And as a result of it, the people in Thiruvananthapuram have now realized that unless they want to live with waste in their front yard, they will have to segregate, they will have to recycle, they will have to compost, and they will have to grow their own vegetables so that they have no pesticides in it. So the NIMBY of the poor has greater power, I believe, than the NIMBY of the rich, because it forces the rich to do things differently. It forces us to ask that development will have to be reinvented so that we can do more with less. If we cannot mine under all our forests, if we cannot build dams on all our rivers, and we cannot pollute with our thermal power plants, we will have limits to growth. So we can and we will have to grow, but we will have to grow differently. And this really is where the opportunity is. So dissent, the deepening of democracy, the use of this space to be able to get the voice of the powerless to be put into the context of saying, so whose front yard, whose backyard are we talking about? My last point is the whole issue of how the biggest agenda of climate change is also going to be very important in terms of reinventing that growth. But here again, as I am presenting to you, is the opportunity. We know today, and this is something that increasingly across the world is understood, that if the world needs to stay below 1.5 degree increase is now out. That is out. But if we want to limit it to 2 degrees, because please understand, the carbon budget that the world has to stay below 1.5 degrees is going to be finished, eaten up, consumed by the end of 2030. That's just 10 years from now. But the fact is that if we want to do something about climate change, then the land agenda becomes critical. We know today that if we plant trees, grow trees, it will mitigate greenhouse gases. Trees will sequester carbon dioxide. It will improve the soil health. And we also know that the changes in agriculture and diets, most importantly diets of the rich, diets of the middle class, will reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. This agenda is today critical. But we know, all of us know today, that we cannot plant trees unless we give the poorest who live in the land the right to its benefit. We need to build economies of the poor. We need to make sure that the control over decision-making goes to the poor. The rights agenda, then, is the agenda for climate change. And these two agendas need to be brought together from our experience, our understanding, even more forcefully. And as I said, therefore, deepening of democracy will be at the core. So as in conclusion, would like to say is one, and this I say to my own community, the environmentalist community, that sustainable development is not possible if it is not equitable. Growth has to be affordable and inclusive for it to be sustainable. So let's bring back the politics of environment into the discussion. For so long, and I would particularly blame my comrades in the Western environmental movement, they have neutered the politics of justice. They have neutered the politics of rights in the environmental discussion. We need to bring it back. We need to discuss the fact that without inclusive, affordable, equitable, and without justice, you will never be able to have a caring earth. So this really then is our opportunity. This is what I believe is the way that we will keep our duty to hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sunita Narayan, for daring us to hope, because it is possible to create a new world. And also you have challenged us not to discuss, but also to act on, to do something, taking personal as well as communitarian initiatives to care for our common home. And this is the down to the earth of which she is the editor. You can go through it a little later. Now I invite His Eminence, Cardinal Pedro Barreto. He was named titular Bishop of Acogida and Apostolic Administrator of Jaén in Peru by John Paul II on 21st November 2001. On 17th July 2004, he was appointed the Archbishop of Huánuco, and on 29th September 2012, Pope Benedict XVI made him a member of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. On 28th June 2018, he was created Cardinal by Pope Francis. He has headed the Justice and Peace section of the Latin American Bishops' Conference, and he has courageously fought the mining industry over its environmental impact on La Oroya. He is the Vice President of the REPAM network of the Pan-Amazonican Church and a member of the organizing committee for the Pan-Amazon Synod of Bishops. I would like to introduce him also that he is a very friendly person with an exemplary humility. I will just give an instance. On 16th of May, we had organized a conference of Amazon, and he was one of the resource persons. And we took him for a dinner in the evening. I came here, I received him here along with the three others. Then I told him one thing, Your Eminence, Su Eminencia. Then he said, Prem, fermate el coche. I said, what is happening? Then he said, if you are going to say next time, Your Eminence, I'm going to get down of the car and I'm not going. He said, I am Pedro. So this is Pedro and this is the Jesuit spirit. So a ustedes las palabras, don Pedro.
Muchas gracias, Prem. Me han invitado para compartir mi experiencia de cómo Dios me ha ido llevando para colaborar con nuestra casa común. Como jesuita voy a dar cuenta de conciencia ante esta asamblea. Una pregunta y un deseo antes de ingresar a la compañía de Jesús. Dos experiencias marcaron mi vida desde adolescente y me iniciaron en el camino hacia Dios, creador del cielo y de la tierra, para colaborar en el cuidado de nuestra casa común. La primera tiene relación con el entorno urbano del centro de la ciudad de Lima, donde nací y viví hasta los 16 años de edad. No estaba en contacto con la naturaleza. Sin embargo, queda en mi memoria los cortos pero significativos paseos familiares hacia el centro del país. El respirar el aire puro, el escuchar el ruido armonioso del agua del caudaloso río, el canto de las aves, la abundante vegetación, el contemplar el cielo azul con el sol radiante, alegraba mi espíritu y ampliaba el horizonte de mi vida. La segunda experiencia fue decisiva para iniciar en mí un proceso de escucha, discernimiento y de acción que continúa hasta hoy de manera creciente y sostenida. La Santa Sede, en 1942, encargó a la Compañía de Jesús en el Perú la atención pastoral del Vicariato Apostólico de San Francisco Javier en el nororiente peruano. Cuando tenía 15 años de edad, siendo alumno del Colegio de la Inmaculada en Lima, pude conocer a los misioneros jesuitas que trabajaban en la Amazonía. Se presentaron con sotana blanca, larga barba, propio de aquella época, acompañados por 3 indígenas amazónicos con las caras pintadas, una corona de coloridas plumas de aves y con vestimentas sencillas. Desde el primer momento me llamó la atención por su forma de vestir, de actuar y de pensar. Valoré la vida entregada de los jesuitas a estos hermanos desconocidos e invisibles para una sociedad urbana en la que yo vivía. Me quedé con una pregunta: ¿quiénes son? Y un deseo clavado en el corazón: ¿por qué no dedicar mi vida a servir a estos hermanos tan distintos a mí y necesitados de ayuda? Considero que estos años de adolescencia, la Compañía de Jesús y los indígenas amazónicos me mostraron el camino hacia Dios, me acercaron a los pobres y me acompañaron en mi juventud. En esos años, muy incipientemente, se inició en mí el deseo de colaborar en el cuidado de nuestra casa común y de los que viven en ella. Nunca me imaginé participar en un sínodo especial para la región amazónica y escuchar los testimonios de hermanos y hermanas indígenas como maestros y maestras en el cuidado de nuestra casa común. Estas 2 experiencias de adolescente, contacto con la naturaleza y con las poblaciones amazónicas, las vivía de manera separada. Hoy las vivo de manera integrada. Una decisión de servicio en mi vida de jesuita y después de obispo. A los 17 años manifesté al padre provincial mi deseo de ingresar a la Compañía de Jesús. Entre otras cosas, me sorprendió una pregunta que me hizo: si el Señor te concede la perseverancia en la Compañía de Jesús, ¿dónde te gustaría trabajar como jesuita? Respondí de inmediato: en el Vicariato Apostólico de San Francisco Javier. Pude darme cuenta que el padre provincial anotó en un cuaderno lo que yo le había dicho. 6 años más tarde, cuando culminé los estudios de filosofía, me llegó una breve carta del provincial en la que me destinaba a trabajar como maestrillo en el Vicariato Apostólico de San Francisco Javier. La noticia me alegró y me confirmó que los superiores provinciales cumplían mi deseo inicial de trabajar en la Amazonía. Inicié los estudios de teología con la seguridad de volver al Vicariato Apostólico de San Francisco Javier. Al culminar los estudios de teología, me ordené de sacerdote en 1971 y muy pronto el provincial me indicó que debía ir de espiritual al colegio que tenemos al sur del Perú. Me dijo que era solo por 2 años y que después se transformaron en 10 años. En realidad, puedo decir que el deseo se quedaba en un simple deseo. Por 20 años más, unos nuevos destinos alargaban la posibilidad de servir tal como era mi ilusión inicial. De pronto, de manera inesperada, el padre provincial me preguntó si aceptaba estar en la terna que iba a presentar la Compañía de Jesús a la Santa Sede para el nuevo obispo del Vicariato Apostólico de San Francisco Javier. Le dije sí, porque estaba seguro que no iba a ser nombrado. Después de un buen tiempo, yo me había olvidado de este asunto. Me llamó el provincial para decirme que era el nuevo obispo del Vicariato Apostólico de San Francisco Javier. Pueden imaginar mi asombro y admiración por este nombramiento. El Señor tiene sus caminos y no coinciden con los nuestros. Nunca me imaginé ser obispo. Una vez pasado el impacto inicial, percibía que mi decisión y mi deseo de servir en la Amazonía, Dios lo confirmaba. Y yo confirmé que hasta el final de mi vida acompañaré a las comunidades Awajún Wampis del nororiente peruano. Ahí pude reencontrarme con la naturaleza exuberante de la Amazonía y de la riqueza humana, cultural y espiritual de los pueblos originarios. Ruptura con mi decisión de servicio de obispo en la Amazonía a arzobispo en los Andes peruanos, donde estoy ahora. A los 2 años y medio de estar como obispo del Vicariato Apostólico de San Francisco Javier, me llega el nombramiento de arzobispo de Huancayo, que está ubicado a 3.250 metros de altura sobre el nivel del mar, en el centro de los Andes peruanos. Me causó una ruptura dolorosa con el proceso largamente soñado desde mi adolescencia. Recuerdo que las 3 Navidades las pasé en Villa Gonzalo, una comunidad Awajún Wampis, acompañado por un jesuita, Manuel García Rendueles, ya fallecido, que vivía allí. Cuando fue la toma de posesión del arzobispado el 5 de septiembre del 2004, fue un grupo de indígenas hasta Huancayo, gesto de amistad que nunca lo olvidaré. En mi nueva sede, los problemas se centraron desde el primer momento en la problemática socioambiental. La Oroya, una de las ciudades más contaminadas del mundo, tiene una fundición polimetálica cuyos humos tóxicos afectaban gravemente la salud de las personas. Y fue en ese contexto donde tuve que actuar de inmediato porque el índice de plomo en la sangre, especialmente en los niños, superaba largamente el máximo permitido por la Organización Mundial de la Salud, 10 microgramos de plomo por decilitro de sangre. Un detonante fue que un análisis hematológico de noviembre del 2004 indicaba que el 99% de los niños menores de 6 años que vivían en la Oroya Antigua tenía como promedio 40 microgramos de plomo en la sangre por decilitro, un verdadero crimen a las personas y al ambiente natural. Deseo de Dios y deseo de la Iglesia. Arzobispo y cardenal. En mayo del 2011 fui elegido presidente del Departamento de Justicia y Solidaridad del Consejo Episcopal Latinoamericano, CELAM. Este nombramiento me hizo ampliar los horizontes de la problemática socioambiental. En el 2013, con el nombramiento del Papa Francisco, se abrieron nuevas perspectivas eclesiales. En abril de ese mismo año, fui invitado por Mauricio López, un laico de espiritualidad ignaciana, aquí presente, para participar en una asamblea de la Red Eclesial Amazónica de Ecuador que se realizó en el Vicariato de Puyo. La experiencia fue impactante desde todo punto de vista. Participaron obispos, sacerdotes, el equipo itinerante, religiosos, religiosas, laicos indígenas, algo que me hacía recordar mis propias motivaciones personales respecto a la Amazonía y sus pueblos. De pronto se me vino la idea, más bien intuición, de poder crear una red eclesial panamazónica. Al principio se veía algo imposible y complejo. Sin embargo, nos atrevimos a arriesgar e iniciamos una propuesta de cronograma inmediato para el mismo año 2013. Puyo en abril, julio en Lima y octubre en Manaus, Brasil. El resultado fue formar una comisión. El cardenal Claudio Humes, Mauricio López, Alfredo Ferro, jesuita que está también aquí presente, Pedro Hughes, un sacerdote columbano, y yo, a fin de organizar un encuentro en Brasilia que se realizó finalmente en septiembre del 2014. Ya en Brasilia, el Papa Francisco envió un mensaje a los que participábamos, animándonos a conformar la red eclesial amazónica REPAN. Este mensaje cambió el programa de la Asamblea. La REPAN fue creada por el Papa Francisco. Nosotros nos pusimos a elaborar por consenso una carta fundacional, la visión y misión, los ejes de trabajo y el equipo ejecutivo. En marzo del 2015, en Roma, se presentó en la Sala Estampa del Vaticano la REPAN, y a los pocos días, el 19 de marzo, el DEJUSOL, Departamento de Justicia y Solidaridad del CELAM, tuvo una audiencia temática en la Comisión Interamericana de los Derechos Humanos, donde se presentó por primera vez la REPAN. La Asamblea General del CELAM de mayo del 2015 decidió por unanimidad acoger a la REPAN y nombrarme como su representante dentro de esa nueva organización amazónica. En 2 años fue organizándose las REPAN nacionales, consolidándose como una manera nueva de realizar nuestro trabajo evangelizador en la Amazonía. El 15 de octubre del 2017, el Papa Francisco convocó un sínodo especial para la región amazónica a realizarse en octubre del 2019 que acabamos de terminar. El tema propuesto, Amazonía, nuevos caminos para la Iglesia y para una ecología integral. La preparación se realizó durante el 2018 y se responsabilizó a la REPAN de la preparación. Este proceso sinodal se puso en marcha de manera organizada y eficaz. Han sido más de 45 asambleas territoriales y otros foros temáticos que enriquecieron los aportes de las comunidades indígenas y ribereñas. Así pude participar en algunas, como en Letem, Guyana, donde los jesuitas acompañan a una comunidad indígena. Una experiencia inolvidable que me hizo revivir mis deseos iniciales de servicio a los pueblos amazónicos. Un detalle inmerecido del Papa Francisco fue el 29 de junio del 2018, en que me creó cardenal de la Iglesia Católica. Para terminar, una ruptura con mi decisión de servicio de obispo en la Amazonía. Esta ruptura se consolidó firmemente en una experiencia fundamentalmente inédita con la realización de este sínodo. Este sínodo lo puedo resumir en 3 palabras: conversión, convicción y compromiso, frutos del sínodo amazónico. Conversión a una espiritualidad de la escucha de Dios, de los otros, de aquellos que son invisibles a la sociedad, de los que el Papa Francisco en Puerto Maldonado, Perú, llamó custodios de la creación. Se trata de experimentar un proceso de volver al amor primero, purificando las motivaciones iniciales y aceptar los nuevos caminos para la Iglesia y para una ecología integral centrados en Cristo desde su cruz y resurrección. Convicción de una gracia recibida sin dudar ni poder dudar que el discernimiento espiritual es la sinodalidad como camino para encontrar a Dios y acompañar a los pobres, a los jóvenes y aprender de ellos, especialmente de los indígenas amazónicos, de su sabiduría ancestral y a vivir sobriamente. Compromiso. Compromiso de servir solo a Cristo y a su esposa la Iglesia bajo el romano pontífice, y que el amor se debe poner más en las obras que en las palabras, para en todo amar y servir a Dios y a los hermanos, colaborando en el cuidado de la casa común. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Su Eminencia, para condividir con nosotros su vida a la gente, aunque de la Iglesia de Panamazónica. Thank you very much, Don Pedro, for sharing with us your life of dedication. Could be a source of inspiration and encouragement to all of us, those who are working to care for our common home. And as he has said, he has always been available and obedient. I would insist on that word, because after the Amazon Synod, he was supposed to go to Assisi to take rest. So he went on Wednesday, and then he came back to Wednesday evening itself, because I requested him to come to confer the diploma to our students. So thank you very much again, Don Pedro, and we'll clap for him again. We had two very profound experiences, one from India and one from Amazon on Latin America. So we have almost 20 minutes to have some questions and answers and your reflections, your comments on what they have shared with us. So the floor is open. You are free to share, you are free to ask questions, clarifications, but I would request you to present yourself before asking any question or any comments. Yes, please present yourself.
My name is Tony Dias, and I am from the Mumbai province, Jesuit. Question is to, of course, Dr. Sunita Narayan. But before that, I thank you for the very nice presentation, very critical, also very hopeful. And also thank you for the immense contribution that you and the CSC has made over decades for environmental causes. Thank you very much for that. My question is to you about democracy, deepening of democracy. I think that's your hope also in a way, and you have seen some hopeful experiences across the world, but chiefly in India, Kerala. But my doubt is this, that all over the world, not only in India, all over the world, there is a crisis of democracy. And I see 2 to 3 major threats to democracy. One is the state and its apparatus. And the second is the corporate power, corporations, or you call it global capital. The third, you could say, probably come from the people themselves in a way, the consumeristic attitude of people. So I see this as threats. And when I say the state, I also include the judiciary in this. Because in many cases, with of course few very good examples of the judiciary and the jurisprudence, in many cases, even the judiciary seems to be siding with the corporate sector and the state. So these are some of the threats. How would you address that? My own small little solution would be that an international networks of people, probably. Yeah?
Okay. Thank you, Donny. We'll take 2 more questions. Yes, please.
I'm Jyoti from Calcutta. Thank you for your presentation and analysis. I very much appreciate it. First time I'm hearing you. I've read quite a bit of it. My point is, you and your team as environmental activists in our country There are connected, responding activists and the campaigns, groups are going on. I am part of Right to Food campaign, West Bengal and India. And there are farmers campaign going on. Occasionally we cut across and say hello to the farmers campaign. We are not really working hand in hand with them. It's a time the corporate is working internationally, transnationally, collaborating beautifully well, and the powerful also doing the same way. Are we not supposed to come together and work very systematically? Because this is affecting at every level of the poor, and we need to work, collaborate each other.
Thank you. We'll take up one question from, because all hands I've seen from South Asia, so I'll give chance that side. From, yes.
I'd also like someone from beyond
Yes, please.
South Asia.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm Rosaline from Myanmar. In our country, we are facing a lot of land issues. Many farmers lose the land and they are being arrested also. And until now, they are facing the trial. And the new land law does not support or does not help the farmers. So I want to know, based on your experiences, what were the concrete actions that were successful in your experience for the farmers to access to their own lands?
Thank you. We'll take up the answers from Dr. Sunita Narayan, and then second round, definitely we'll have some questions to Don Pedro also, just to remind. Yes. No. Second.
First one I do. Second round is for you. Okay. So I think, we know the threats to our democracy all over the world. It's not an India issue anymore. It's an issue across the world. Across the world, democracy is under threat today. And I agree with you. I think the only way to build, is to build greater networks and greater voice. And the problem that we are having today is, whether it's media, which would give the space for these voices. Let me be very clear. I work across, I work in India, but I will never get anyone from New York Times or any of the powerful media houses ever discuss with me the issue of climate injustice. They would like to interview me constantly, but on how bad my own government is, okay? Which is a good narrative for them to play, which is fine. We say what we have to say. We say it in India, we say it anywhere. That's what our work is. But there is a global narrative which is as powerful, which is not dictated by any one of us. And there is a narrative which is pushing the whole issue of middle-class consumerism. The entire issue of climate change is we need some win-win solutions. Win. That's what I keep hearing about. And I keep saying, we are losing in all your win-wins. So let's be clear, this is something that is, but that's the opportunity. All of you here are part of whatever all of us can do to push against. If democracy is at threat, then we need to stand there to fight it. And I think that is how, that is the hope that we have. And I agree, movements have to come together. Movements are coming together increasingly. I see that in our world. I think movements are coming together. The narrative is becoming much more clearer today, that it's not one against the other. It's actually everyone is enjoined in it. So I think the movements are coming together. Where I see my fear is that even the power of the movements is not we need to be more powerful. And that's what we need to work towards. And that really goes to answering your question. There have been very successful movements of the poor in many parts of the world. And those movements have come at huge cost to them. Let's be very clear. There is a movement against bauxite mining in India and in Niyamgiri, which has been a movement of tribals who have stood there to say, you will not mine my forest. But it has come at huge cost to them. but it has meant that there has been some success. The Land Acquisition Act in India came at a through huge pressure where people came together to say that you cannot acquire land for what you call public good. You need to be able to pay the price for it. Subsequent governments have diluted it because there is this sense that, development, there is this whole chimera of what development means. But on the other hand, I do feel that, our societies have a goodness in them, and we need to, we need to optimize on that goodness to show that if the poor are badly impacted, then it will not be good for anyone. And I think that's where I think the power comes from.
We have still 8 minutes to take another round of questions, but now I definitely want to, and then last question to. Sí.
Yo quisiera responder muy sucintamente a las preguntas. Me han hecho recordar a una mujer que se atreve, se arriesga a ir en circunstancias difíciles al sepulcro donde Jesús estaba muerto para ella, y se encuentra de que no está el cuerpo y va corriendo a avisar a los apóstoles muertos de miedo, encerrados. Una mujer que va corriendo a avisar. Y sale Pedro, ya adulto, por no decir ya mayorcito, y también sale Juan. Pedro es la iglesia, Juan es Padre Arrupe para mí y compañía de Jesús. Salen corriendo y el más joven, Arrupe, y la compañía llegan primero, pero no entra al sepulcro. Espera que llegue la iglesia. Ritmos distintos. Sin embargo, creo que hay toda una experiencia muy grata de que ahora el Papa Francisco es de alguna manera el otro Arrupe que va delante de nosotros. Tenemos que correr para estar a la altura del Papa Francisco. Una indígena amazónica le dijo en el aula, hermano Francisco, así le llaman, hermano Francisco, tú te vemos solo, pero que sepas que los pueblos originarios estamos contigo, estamos contigo. Y ahí dijo Cardenal Pedro Barreto, agarre su remo y reme con el Papa Francisco. Era una indígena peruana que me conocía. También dijo otros 2 obispos peruanos. ¿Qué cosa quiero decir con esto? Que para mí, hace unos 8 años, la Compañía de Jesús iba adelante. Yo estaba en el CELAM y veía que la compañía iba adelante. Y está bien, creo que ese es el carisma de la compañía. Pero hubo un momento que la compañía se integró en esta red eclesial pan-amazónica. Y hay una riqueza muy grande. Sí estamos en red muy inicialmente, estamos comunicándonos, y si ha habido una experiencia sinodal tan profunda, ha sido porque esta red ha sido como un instrumento dócil en las manos de Dios para escuchar a los indígenas y llevar la voz de ellos en el sínodo. Por tanto, yo les animo a ustedes también a seguir con esta espiritualidad ignaciana, jesuita, con rapidez, porque el Papa Francisco está delante de la Compañía de Jesús. Antes teníamos que jalar a la iglesia, ahora es el Papa que nos jala a nosotros. No dejemos solo al Papa Francisco.
Gracias. We'll take up another 2 questions, one from Africa here, and then one from Latin America there. I saw one hand. Yes, the lady at the, sorry. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Nolutando Nono, and I'm from South Africa. My question is for both panelists, actually. The first one speaks to the struggle between industrializing and environmental sustainability, and where commonly known third world countries then fall within the spectrum of that? And then the second one looks at things like the definition of gross human rights violations in terms of the ICC and why it is that states, specifically those that are the greatest contributors to things like carbon emissions and things like that, aren't being held at the same standard, because in reality that definition ought to be able to speak to that as well. And lastly, where the balance is when it comes to the question of democracy and whether or not we hold that democracy to be important at the point where it's contradictory to things like common good and human dignity. Because under democracy, a lot of things like the gap between the rich and the poor increase. Things like environmental care aren't necessarily the most important things when people can gain financial growth in specific instances. So do we really value democracy that much?
Okay. Yes, anyway, you have. Very good.
Also part of South Asia.
Was that?
It's also part of South Asia.
Now, according to us, it's Asia Pacific. Okay. For both of you, in the sense, I said Myanmar, it's partly because 87% of Myanmar is Buddhism. We start with there is suffering, there is cause for suffering, and there are reasons to alleviate that suffering. What is the suffering? 1964, till 1964, my parents were born and brought up there, but from Myanmar, all foreigners have to be out. Maryland Jesuits were out, my parents were out. Left, many of them lived in the forest, my own relatives. After going there, I was born in Tamil Nadu, joined Gujarat province. After 49 years, society has missioned back to Myanmar. Now I'm in Myanmar, seeing this particular address is from the Kachin state, what our JRS coordinator of Myanmar, Rosalyn, mentioned. Whoever saw my name, Myanmar, how is the problem of Rohingyas there? Rohingyas. It's not just mere Rohingyas alone of 7 lakhs living in Bangladesh, but there are also 1 lakh, nearly 50,000 persons are living in internally displaced persons because of above the earth, below the earth, there is a richness in Kachin state. China.
Okay, Fatherji, could you please give the question so that we have 5 minutes?
The question is, to both of them, the main thing is, you are talking about the democracy, deepening of democracy and Pan-Amazon. We have our own problems where people are not aware of such nature resources are taken and democratic leaders are, their hands are uncuffed, Aung San Suu Kyi and others. How do you bring in the element of the great democracy? And like Pan-Amazon, we have our own problems in Myanmar. How to alleviate such suffering?
We will not take any more questions, but we'll ask the panelists to respond. A ustedes también puede iniciar también. We have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. I'll keep it very short, but you asked, sorry, can I have your name? You asked some very fundamental questions, so it's difficult for me to give you, as I'm under pressure to give you very quick answers. But very quickly, the whole issue about industrialization in our part of the world. I think what we need to explain more and more clearly is the fact that the industrial growth model that the Western world followed, it's just not working for us because of the fact, the reason is that they are still cleaning up and they're messing up our entire atmosphere. They've externalized. They may have clean air in wherever they live, but the entire carbon dioxides have filled our atmosphere, so you've externalized it. Now, that just doesn't work for us because we do not have the money and the resources to clean up after we pollute. That's our problem. If we had that kind of money and we could also externalize and we had all the power, then we'd also fill up the atmosphere with emissions. But we can't because we We have to minimize our pollution. So our way of doing things has to be different for our own imperative. And that's where your second issue of human rights, I mean, it does amaze me that how the debate on human rights is not getting extended to the fact that there is a major crisis that the rich of the world have created, which is now making the poor the victims. We need to make sure that that debate does not get lost. The injustice of it does not get lost. Okay? And the third is really democracy that was asked from Myanmar as well. Listen, I'm a very strong believer that democracy, however flawed it is the one tool that we have to give voice to the voiceless. And that you need to deepen it. Our problem with democracy today is that it's at the top, it's flawed at the top. And what was asked earlier is exactly the problem. Democracy is today, as I said, is the consuming classes, the market, and the state. Those have become one. We need to be able to take democracy down to where it really matters. And that's what, for instance, Mahatma Gandhi talked about participatory democracy versus representative democracy. That's what we need to talk about today. I know it's difficult. I know that the powers are so strong. I know that the minerals of Myanmar will be taken, and it's a war between two countries in the world who want the resources. We know that. But our power is to speak truth to power. That's the only thing that we have. And that's what we need to continue to do.
Thank you. Jiménez, últimas palabras tuyas.
Yo recuerdo que en la historia del padre Pedro Arrupe que él, cuando fue la experiencia dolorosa de la bomba de Hiroshima, convirtió el noviciado en un hospital para recoger a los heridos. Esta misma imagen, también el Papa Francisco habla que la Iglesia tiene que ser como un hospital de campaña, no simplemente para recoger los heridos, sino también para denunciar las consecuencias nefastas en la vida de la sociedad por este sistema económico imperante que mata. En Santa Cruz de la Sierra el Papa Francisco repitió esta misma idea. Este sistema no se aguanta más. El cambio climático es consecuencia de este sistema. Entonces se nos invita no solamente a ser un hospital de campaña, sino también un espacio de la democracia, de respeto a la dignidad de la persona humana, especialmente de los pueblos originarios de cualquier continente y especialmente para nosotros desde la Amazonía.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence and Dr. Sunita Narayan. We are punctually concluding at 10:15. It's not even 1 second beyond. So thank you very much for your patience, for your attention to our sharing of our two specialists here. If you want to ask some questions, both the panelists are here. After the discussion, you can share always.